وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أبدا إلى قيام يوم الدين. Amma ba'd, respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah for this opportunity and blessing, and my apologies for being a tad bit late today as a result of traffic. It is a difficult day and a difficult number of hours as the Muslim community in the United States has come to terms with the fact that the recent shootings in New Mexico, which have taken the lives of 4 innocent Muslim men, were in fact perpetrated by a Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Verily, the believers are brothers to one another. إنما المؤمنون إخوة. There's one way to read this verse in which it says that only the believers have the special proximity and the special closeness that they can refer to each other as brothers. Now, this is a very common and a very clear concept in Islam, that of fraternity and that of sorority, sisterhood and brotherhood, the unity of the ummah, the oneness of the ummah. The narrations are plenty in which, amongst other things, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that the believers are like one body. Right? And the narration continues that if one part of the body aches or if one part of the body is hurting, naturally, just like if your knee is hurting or if your shoulder is hurting or if your head is hurting, some other limb, some other part of the body comes to its aid, to its assistance, to its help. Other narrations of the Prophet ﷺ mention that if someone wakes up in the morning and is not concerned with the affairs of this ummah, is not concerned with the affairs of his or her fellow Muslims, they're not of this ummah. Now, one thing that we've tried to mention on occasion, right? Because one thing is to be reactionary to these types of occurrences, and another thing is to understand the historical circumstances, understand the current forces, understand the realities that are active within our circles and outside of our circles. Now, there are those who attempt to put all the blame and put all the problems and put all the issues that this ummah faces onto the shoulders of outside forces. But there are very clear and very cemented historical factors which have found their way today in the common discourse of Muslims that dehumanizes, takes out and excommunicates from the realm of quote-unquote orthodoxy of Islam, the canon of Islam, that spreads lies about Muslims and what their beliefs are, right? Looks at them and their prayers and their beliefs and other things as being un-Islamic, as being politically motivated, as being something that is untruthful, that has really nefarious and ulterior motives that they're unwilling to actually disclose to you as they're engaging in one-to-one conversation or public discourses, etc. You have to be very careful because behind the scenes, they actually believe something else. And what they're practicing is dissimulation. They're practicing taqiyya. They're actually hiding and they're covering what their true nefarious evil beliefs are, which is rooted in shirk, which is rooted in hatred of the companions of the Prophet, which is rooted in polytheism, which is rooted in exaggerations, which is rooted in borrowings from the beliefs of the ancient Persians and Magians and others. Who are we talking about? We're talking about the very active and mainstream discourse in mainly majority Sunni communities and populations related to Shi'i Muslims. This is a fact. The attacks that have been taking place in New Mexico are rooted not as a fringe thing, but this is a natural conclusion and a natural effect of the vitriol and the hatred and the toxicity that is present and active in various levels of common public Muslim discourse. Whether it's the Muslim Student Association gatherings, whether it's halaqat and Friday circles that people have, whether it's private studies, let alone the type of toxic nonsense and hatred that is spewed on YouTube and elsewhere, and even in the context of scholarly studies, and even in academia. There are individuals of Muslim background, there are individuals who assign and subscribe to one of the four currently accepted Sunni schools of thought. And the problem with this is, and the problem that we talk about is, the way that we understand Islam today is not the way that Islam played out. There is nothing in Islamic history, there is nothing in Islamic history which limits the presence of 4 schools of thought, or 5 schools of thought, or 6 schools of thought. What we understand as schools of thought, whether it's the Ja'fari school of thought, whether it's the Hanafi, the Hanbali, the Maliki, the Shafi'i, the Zahiri, the Batini, the Ibadi, all of these various schools of thought are a result of historical crystallizations and factors and forces and contentions. Do not think that what you and I understand as a particular school of thought just was hand-wrapped and delivered to us through Amazon Prime from the time of the Prophet until today without anyone coming in and changing things, adding things, interpreting things, counter-interpretations, right? These are facts. Now, if someone is going around shooting other innocent Muslims to death, and it seems from the information that we have thus far that this was caused from the effect or the impact of this individual's daughter wanting to marry someone who was Shi'i. Now, what leads someone to go and say that I'm going to kill someone else, people that he did not know? He was targeting them because their last name was Hussein. We're in the month of Muharram. La ilaha illallah. We're in the month of Muharram. The Quran says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. Believers are brothers. But if someone is saying that this particular school of thought's beliefs are not Islamic, we don't accept them. They're not part of the orthodoxy. They have a different Quran. I can go through the list of all of this stuff. They have a different Quran. We've had individuals come to the center and ask, do the Shi'is have a different Quran? In the modern world. Now, you can't find, if we unpack this, how ludicrous it is astonishing. If someone believes that there's an alternative Quran, they do not know the Quran themselves. Listen to this very carefully. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to be very brief here. If someone utters or says that there is another Quran or a different version of the Quran, they're outside of the bounds of Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala avers and insists in the Quran that this Quran will not change. Yes or no? This Quran will not change. So how can there be a different Quran? Where is this different Quran? What surahs have been removed from it? What verses have been added to it? Where is it? That's number one. So if someone comes, whatever shaykh, whatever scholar, whatever layperson says that the Shi'is have a different Quran, that person lacks knowledge, the very elementary, rudimentary understanding and commitment to Islamic knowledge. They lack it. Because what they're making is, in fact, a political statement. They are politicizing religion. And what I mean by this is that they are lying. Either they are willfully and intentionally lying for political reasons, for reasons of influence, for reasons of control. And do not think that someone who sits on the minbar is completely absolved or removed from these types of worldly inclinations and entanglements. People will lie in order to divert your attention from something, in order to prevent certain things from happening. They will lie. Now, lies are of two types. Either someone is intentionally lying and they know that they're lying, that's one thing, or they are simply regurgitating and repeating lies that they have uncritically absorbed from others. And both of these are problematic. Anyone who's a serious believer, anyone who's a serious individual, anyone, let alone who's a serious scholar, does not just simply listen to things and says, oh, that's haq, that's truth, let me just move on. You think about it, you analyze it, you contrast it, right? That's number one. Number two is this belief that the Shi'is, for example, believe that the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, salamullah alayhim ajma'in, are God, and they worship them, they go to their grave worshippers, etc. You've heard this, you've read this. You may have even said, listened to this directly by someone. Now, the problem with these things, besides the fact that they're absolute lies, is that the key thing that I'm trying to get at is many of you are not shocked by these terms. Am I correct? You all have heard this or read it in one place or another. Can I get a nod like this is actually the case, right? Yeah, so this is no surprise. This is no surprise that these types of things are spewed, these types of things exist, that the Shi'is, for example, don't do their prayer, that the Shi'is make what is haram halal, that the Shi'is believe that Imam Ali alayhi salam should have been the prophet, and the angel Jibreel alayhi salam made a mistake by delivering. These are the things that are out there. These aren't some fringe kind of things that I'm making up or I'm concocting because I'm emotional. I'm not. These are facts of history. These are the types of things that are spewed and that are said and that are in common discourse amongst Muslim communities. Amongst Muslim communities. We have a sister who is amongst this gathering who comes she's not here today, but she comes to the center. And she comes from a Sunni family. And she was speaking to me one time. She decided to embrace the Shi'i school of thought. There's nothing wrong with this. I mean, there's a fatwa from Al-Azhar stating that if somebody wants to change their school of thought, they can. People act like it's life or death, like you're changing religions. You see, this is not the case. Fiqh is the madhab. It's a path that you take on. And 85-90% of fiqh is pretty much an agreement, but there are various interpretations. There are various differences that exist. Now, someone has the freedom and the right to choose one thing or another. The problem is this. The problem is acting like the other side is not Muslim enough, or they're not Muslim, their prayers aren't accepted, their fasts aren't accepted, their Islam isn't accepted. It's only me who's going to go to heaven. It's only me who is saved and has salvation. And this is wrong. Whether someone who's Sunni believes this about Shi'is, whether someone who's Shi'i believes this about Sunnis. And we've been very clear in this, that we as Muslims must understand and come to terms that we are Muslims. When someone is a brother, when the Quran says that إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ, it doesn't mean that you agree and you read and you interpret everything the same way. If you have brothers, if you have sisters, if you have best friends, or even if you are within the same madhab, you know that there are different interpretations. The issue of unity and brotherhood isn't that we are exactly the same in our views and beliefs. That's not what brotherhood means. That's not what unity means. Unity doesn't mean that I have to, quote unquote, pretend to be not Shia enough or moderate Shia for you to accept me. What does that mean? It's like, when people say moderate Muslims. What is a moderate Muslim? What does that mean? Islam has fundamentals. You pray 5 times a day, you have halal, you have haram. Does a moderate Muslim kind of do this halfway? This doesn't make sense. But the issue is that we have to understand and come to know one another. This is what's lacking. So when I asked you, you all have heard these issues about the Shiites. You all said, yes, you've heard it. It may have been said to you, etc. Now the question that I want to ask you is, what did you do in response to this? What did you do in response to this? The problem is that oftentimes when we hear these types of misinformation and lies, we remain silent. We may laugh about it. Oh, Shi'is, they just beat themselves. Self-flagellation. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Oh, they cut their babies, right? They have orgies in their mosques and Husseyniyas because of mut'ah. I mean, don't act shocked. I'm not making these up. These are the types of things that are out there, not by a fringe. This is the mainstream view. This is the mainstream view. And I promise you one thing, that these individuals who state such things, who plant this type of poison and lies in the minds of individuals, well, they will be held accountable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because these words have consequences. Just in the last 2 weeks, there have been over 300 innocent Shi'i Muslims who've been killed in Afghanistan as a result of bombings. How did this happen? This is what we're talking about. Do not think that this is only stuff that happens over there. This is the type of conversation that occurs here in America, in the Bay Area. In the Bay Area. There's a mosque that's less than 7 minutes away from here. One of the sisters who was trying to come to the center went to that mosque and said, where is the ladies section? And you know, Allah is my witness. I've never lied and I have never exaggerated from this minbar. My conscience is clean. I don't have to exaggerate. These are realities. These are facts. She was told that if you're looking for the Kafir Center, it's on Madison. Less than 7 minutes away from here. What makes the Shi'is Kafir? Do they not accept the Quran? Do they not accept the prophecy of the Prophet? Do they not accept the oneness of Allah subhanahu? What makes them Kafir? Now, if you say that interpretations and views of the Sahaba put someone outside of the realm of Islam, we have a very simple invitation and offer. Where in the Quran does this say that the Sahaba are sanctified? Where in Islamic history does it say that the companions of the Prophet did not make mistakes, that they did not argue with one another, that some of them did not leave Islam and become Christians, that there weren't attempts made on the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? If nothing else, you want to say that it's ijtihad between the companions. Well, we know that the blood of innocent Muslims were killed. Was it not? Jamal, were there not Muslims killed? Is it simply an issue of ijtihad and interpretation? Or Safin, were Muslims not killed? Is it simply an issue of ijtihad and interpretation? Now, if we want to treat Islamic history as some type of Disney movie where everyone is friends and everyone gets along, that's your prerogative. But it's not rooted in seriousness. It's not rooted in knowledge. It's not rooted in sincerity and taqwa. It's a political statement. It's a political act. Right? Just like when someone sits, and I don't want to start naming these centers, but these people know who they are. If someone says, and they say, well, the Shiites, they're a political movement. That's a very intentionally misleading statement. But what makes, quote unquote, the Sunnis less political? Especially when we talk about the Arab Spring. You all remember the countries that were involved in the Arab Spring? Egypt, Tunisia, correct? Syria. There was one country that was forgotten, Bahrain. Why was Bahrain left out? Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who is deeply respected in the Muslim world, right? He made a statement that the uprisings in Bahrain are fasad and political and should not be supported. Bahrain was one of the only instances in which the people had a civil protest and movement without the presence of any arms. Because we know, for example, in Syria very soon, the revolution was overtaken by armed groups, Takfiri groups. No, we're no fans of Bashar al-Assad, and he's a criminal himself. But Bahrain was very different. And you know who sent in soldiers to crush the protesters in Bahrain? Protesters who were Sunni and protesters who were Shi'i, because Bahrain is a Shi'i majority country. Saudi Arabia and Jordan. Why should someone who wears the garb of a soldier go and kill and shoot innocent civilians who are asking for their freedom? But in Egypt, or in Jordan, or in Syria, or in Tunisia, we say, yes, these are our brothers and we support them. Yes? This is hypocrisy. Now, when we hear these types of lies, or when we read these types of lies on the internet, how are we responding to it? How are we holding people accountable? How are we holding that speaker accountable when he lies, or when he dehumanizes, or when he says that Shi'is are not Muslim, or they're not within the orthodoxy? How are we responding, or are we afraid? Now, I myself, as in my young age, had walked out of centers that were Shi'i because the speaker said something that was unbecoming towards Sunni. God is my witness. As a 17-year-old, I've walked out. As a 19-year-old, I've walked out. I've confronted scholars about it, not because I'm someone special, but because I fear God. But because I also know Sunnis. I have Sunnis in my own family. My family is from the top scholars of Samarkand, who led the Dar al-Huffaz in Kabul and in Samarkand. I don't talk about this. I know the Sunni school very well. I have no problem with the Sunni school of thought. Anyone who's Sunni, anyone who's Shi'i, I don't look at them as any different. Because God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knows what's in the heart of people. If someone has iman, if someone has taqwa, if someone has honesty, that's what matters. Now, the love of the Ahlul Bayt, yes, this is critical, this is key for all Muslims, not Shi'i, not Sunni. Unless someone is Nawasib and they have hatred for the family of the Prophet, that's a different issue, right? But someone is going around and killing people who are Shi'i based on their name because his daughter wants to go marry someone who is Shia. Now, there are Muslim families who either the son or the daughter is marrying someone who is not even Muslim, but they simply take the Shahada during the nikah. These are facts. Unless you've been hiding somewhere, these are facts that take place. They don't have a problem with these issues. But if somebody wants to marry a guy or a gal who is Shi'i, then all hell breaks loose. What a tragedy. What a senseless tragedy. But this happens not out of the blue. This happens as a natural result of particular misinterpretations and particular lies and particular labels and desensitization and dehumanization to Shi'i Muslims being an active component of Muslim history, while most Muslims are silent about it. Why is there outrage about Palestine? And rightly so, but there's no outrage about what's taking place against Shi'is in Afghanistan. Why? Are they less Muslim? Are they less Muslim? You know, in the bombings in Afghanistan, the youngest victim was 4 years old. 4 years old. What was his crime? What was his crime? What was the crime of these 4 innocent individuals in New Mexico who were minding their own business and were killed? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clear. فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. Make amends and make corrections and make peace between your 2 brothers. If there are lies, they must be corrected. This is the responsibility of every serious Sunni speaker and student of knowledge, or anyone else. This is their responsibility. They will be held accountable to this. This is itmam hujjat. They will be held accountable to it. We will be held accountable to it on the day of judgment. Silence in this case is absolute violence. It's dehumanization. It's partaking actively or passively in this vitriol, and this is only going to become worse and worse. I mentioned about a month and a half ago, there was an attempt in Chicago this time to attack a Shi'i center, kill the imam of the center, and hold the rest of the individuals hostage. This was a plot that was foiled. You didn't hear about it in the news. Now imagine, I just want to have us face our own hypocrisies. What if the shooter in New Mexico turned out to be a white supremacist? How would the Muslims react? How would Muslim organizations, every quote-unquote Muslim celebrity, scholar, and community leader, and speaker, and so forth, will release videos and have talks, and they will be all worked out, right? They'll be worked up in their anger, and rightly so, because innocent people were killed. But white supremacy is looked at as a systemic thing that holds power, does it not? That is armed and that's willing to deploy violence, is it not? That's what makes it dangerous. I want to say something that's going to sound a bit controversial, but we have to say the truth. These types of interpretations that are active within the Sunni school of thought are systemically oppressive, and it has to be recognized as such. There are systemic oppressions active within the Sunni school of thought in interpretations, in misinterpretations, in othering, in dehumanization, and in takfir of Shi'i Muslims, which has gone unquestioned for way too long. Now, of course, within the Shi'i school of thought as well, there are individuals who spew hatred and vitriol, and that should also be criticized and denied and critiqued, absolutely. But when we look at the last 50, 60, 70, 100 years, how often do we see Shi'is going into centers of Sunni Muslims and blowing themselves up or planting bombs? Do Sunnis fear for their lives when they're traveling in Shi'i majority communities, or if they enter into a Shi'i majority center, do they fear that someone will attack them or curse them or tell them that they're not Muslim and to get out of the mosque? Will they? Absolutely not. But when Shi'is go to a center, they have to be careful, because if they take out the turba, the clay tablet, that is representative of earth. If you worship an idol, you don't prostrate on the idol. You elevate the idol and you worship it, you bow down to it. The reason why Shi'i Muslims pray on a clay tablet, or if the clay tablet is not there, a piece of earth, or a leaf, or sand, or grass, or something along those lines, was because the Prophet ﷺ, according to Islamic history and within this fiqh interpretation, only made prostration on earth. Something that you consume or something that you wear, according to the Shi'i madhab, is not something that you should prostrate on. It's also a reminder that you come from earth and you go back to earth. Yes? Now, if they take out this turba, they may be kicked out of the mosque. This has happened to many people in the Bay Area. When I have traveled through many parts of the Muslim world, I've had to pray with my hands closed because I didn't know if somebody would come as I'm in prayer and attack me. These are not exaggerations. If I'm in Amman, if I'm in Jordan, and I'm in the heart of Jordan, well, there's a very anti-Shi'i sentiment in Jordan, right? But you can't have the same thing if you're, for example, traveling in, let's say, in Chindawul in Kabul, right? Or in Isfahan or something along those lines. Now, we don't discuss these things because we think that the problems are always from the outside. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us and reminds us of this responsibility. Not only this responsibility of brotherhood, but this responsibility that we must make corrections. Someone who is a serious scholar and sees the historical wrongs and even views of previous scholars which were wrong, they should speak out against it. They should critique it and not say, well, these are our elders and these are our senior scholars and historical figures. We're just going to repeat it. That's wrong. These scholars and interpreters of Islam are simply that. They're interpreters of Islam. Their interpretations are not infallible. It's rooted in their own views, in their own psychologies, in their own opinions, in their own socio-economic, political contexts. The human being lives in this type of milieu and environment, and they're impacted by it. Right? Now, here in the center, the sisters are sitting, the brothers are sitting here. We all see one another, yes? In certain parts of the Muslim world, this would be considered heretical. This would be considered absurd for men and women to be sitting in the same room listening to a talk on Islam. Really, they would think this. There are places in the United States that the women's prayer section is a closet. These are facts, right? But the issue is, do you imagine and do you commit to a different reality and possibility for Shi'is and Sunnis to live with one another, to be with one another, to respect one another, right? To give credence and value to the views and interpretations of one another? Or is it if the Shi'i says something, then the automatic response is, well, those are Shi'i sources. Those are Shi'i sources, right? Some of these so-called celebrity scholars here in the United States released a statement, I know many Shi'is and they do not curse the Sahaba. Oh, it's kind of like saying, I know many black people who don't believe in violence. It's a very political, very ignorant kind of, statement to make. It's a whataboutism, or kind of an issue of like, well, I like you if you do this. If you are a model minority, then I accept you. But if you speak your mind, if you stake some claims, if you raise your voice, oh, then you're one of those bad Shias. You're only a good Shia if you just shut up and allow us to dominate, and then the rest will be okay. But if you say something, then we're going to come after you, right? And these are facts. These are things that happen. But the point of all of this is to say, I myself have thought on multiple occasions, what's the likelihood of someone barging into this center and attacking someone here? Wallahi, this has crossed my mind multiple times. What would we do? What would my reaction be? What could I do to help those who are praying behind me, who I have the responsibility in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as I stand to lead prayer? Those who stand behind me, I have a responsibility towards them. I'm representing you. This shouldn't be the case. And the beauty of this center and many other similar centers is for those of our brothers and sisters who ascribe to one of the Sunni madahib, I hope you feel and I hope you can agree that you've never been othered. You've never felt that I'm looked at differently at the center. I'm treated differently at the center. Or this center doesn't really kind of align with Islam. It's a very weird interpretation. I'm only here because of convenience. We come and we pray together. You have heard the Quran being recited. You have heard the content of these talks being given. Where have we contradicted the Quran? Where have we contradicted the usul of Islam? Where have we contradicted, or where have we made takfir of someone else who prays a different way, who interprets something in a different way, right? But most people today are silent. Most people today are silent about the historical and understand the current oppressive systems. It's a system. These are not just exceptions. These are systems of communication, systems of confinement and interpretation, systems of behavior, which comes down top to bottom, which is present in books, which is present in lectures, which is present in halaqat and in circles. Can we marry Shias? No. Can we talk about Muharram? No. That's a Shi'i thing. You should fast during the day of Ashura. Now the new thing is you wish one another happy Islamic New Year. Where did this come from? These are political statements. You go back through Islamic history, no one's saying happy New Year when it comes to Muharram. No one is saying this. It's only in the last decade or so that people are now saying happy Islamic New Year when it's Muharram. These are political statements. These are attempts to take us away from the context of the month of Muharram and the realities of how the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet ﷺ were oppressed. This is not a Shi'i Sunni thing. You go to places like Afghanistan, you go to places like Samarkand, Tajikistan, you go to places like Egypt, for example, in the heart of Cairo, in Turkey, whether you are Shi'i or whether you are Sunni, when it comes to Ashura, it's a time of mourning. It's a type of community and collective gathering to remember the household of the Prophet ﷺ. People bake food and other things to give a nadr. These are facts of history. But there are people, there are quote-unquote scholars, there are systems, there are governments that are attempting to cement particular interpretations about the Shi'is, about Islamic history, about the history of the Sunni school of thought, etc., in order for them to maintain a particular control over the narrative and over the contours of Islam. And they are authorizing, either actively or inactively, this type of violence from taking place. When you say someone is not Muslim, the way that Islam understands religion is that it's part of your fitrah. You see? And Islam is an intrinsic, natural part of our DNA. Whether someone's Christian, whether someone's Jewish, whether someone's X or Y, Islam is an intrinsic part of creation. When you say someone is not Muslim, you're not only discounting them from within the contours of religion as understood, but also of their humanity. And over time, of course, this trend of Shia kafir, taqiyya, right? This starts being repeated. This becomes normalized. This becomes desensitized. Shias, they only pray 3 times a day. They don't fast, right? My father, who is a scholar and leads one of these centers in the Bay Area, we don't talk about this. When he used to pray, when he used to recite the Quran and such, people used to tell him that you're so devout. Why are you Shia? Why are you Shia? These are the mentalities that are out there. Right? These are the mentalities that are out there. We have to change this. Not only when it comes to Shi'is, but also when it comes to Sunnis. When also it comes to Christians, when it comes to Jews, when it comes to Hindus. As Imam Ali sallallahu alayhi mentioned in Nahj al-Balagha, people are of 2 kinds. We've mentioned this before. Either your brother in faith or your equal in humanity. Woe to the ignorance and to the diseased heart that not only misses the understanding of the first, but also misses the understanding of the second. And as a result of this, we see the type of violence and the type of vitriol and the type of demonizations that take place against innocent, practicing, committed, devout Muslims. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance and nur and correction and islah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unite us under the banner of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Ya Allah, purify our hearts and our intentions, guide us on the straight path, unite the Muslims, protect the innocent amongst us, and defeat the voices and the backs of those who plot and who scheme against us. Rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Ya Allah, increase us in the love of your Prophet, in the love of his Ahlul Bayt, and in the love of Islam. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. A result of this unity and togetherness, and we said that unity doesn't mean sameness. That's not unity. We can have our own colors, our own hues, our own interpretations, just like all of you here are dressed differently. You have different faces, you have different things, but you are believers, you are Muslims, right? And we say that we are going to pray congregational prayer together, right? Unity is not sameness, but it's togetherness. The believers should be together. What are our aims? What do we want as Muslims in this country? What do we want as Muslims, as dignified human beings in this world? We want economic justice, right? We want religious safety of our beliefs and movement. We want access to resources. We want peace, right? We want justice, right? We want freedoms. And do not think that what's happening in the United States with the overturning of particular laws and the type of drumming up of this xenophobic, nativist, sort of provincial, ignorant thing that's taking place by the Republicans and others, that's rooted in money. And this individual, Alex Jones, made $40 million a year or $90 million a year, right? So yeah, if you're making $90 million a year, you're definitely going to say that, you know, Obama's the devil and there's devil worshiping taking place within the Democratic Party and there's this and that and Antifa is against America, all of this stuff that's taking place. Now, similarly, there are individuals who wear the garb of scholarship, and because they want to maintain their quote-unquote position, they're going to say certain things which is a lie, which is wrong, which is not truthful. Right? Now, togetherness is important. We have to respect one another. We have to honor one another. We have to listen to one another so that we can actually understand what the other side is saying. Not just assume that, no, I'm going to tell you what you believe. I'm going to tell you what you're going to say. Muslims after 9/11 spent so much time, right, complaining about the fact that Christians and Jews and others in America actually don't read and don't listen to Muslims themselves. They base it off misinterpretations or bad faith interpretations of Islam from others. Did we not? We did. Now, I want to offer one thing. How can we not, and why don't we extend the same courtesy to Shi'i Muslims? Why do we insist that we know what they believe, we know what their interpretations are, we know what their texts say, we know what their history is, we know what their beliefs are? You see the hypocrisy and the dissonance here that takes place? All we're asking for as human beings, as Muslims, is for the same type of honesty and the same type of truthfulness and the same type of sincerity that we want from others, that we offer it to each other. We have so many events of when we meet with Christians and Jews and Hindus and non, people who are not even religiously inclined. How many programs do we have with Shi'is and Sunnis that isn't just some type of platitude and we are all Muslims, brother? No, As soon as you turn back and when you're sitting in your halaqah and someone asks you, is it okay to marry someone who is Shi'i? You say no, then no, we're not all Muslims, brother. You have a problem. And that problem has to be addressed, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the result of this togetherness, the result of this islah is the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you must have mindfulness and be conscious of Allah. Wattaqullah. Guard your heart, guard your mind and psychology, guard your tongue and guard your ear and eyes. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. In order for mercy to reach you and us, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the soul of the four innocent martyrs, the four innocent individuals whose lives were senselessly taken. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant healing and sabr to their families, to their communities, to us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reform all that is disease within us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cut off the power and the words and the influence and the text of individuals who attempt to create division and hatred and animosity between Muslims. Ya Allah, we ask you to unite us and to unify us. We ask you to guide us. We ask you to bless us with knowledge and nur and ilm and ikhlas. And we ask you, Ya Allah, to forgive us our sins and our shortcomings, to grant healing to all those who are sick, to grant increase to all those who are indebted, and give an increase to their rizq, Ya basit al-rizq, and to take us not from this world until and unless we have earned your mercy and your special favor. بحق محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.